With the muddy smell, feces, and rotten food in the muddy air, when Corleone opened his eyes again, he found himself lying in this cold and humid cell. The stench was even worse than a pigsty. There were dozens of teenagers who stayed in the cell with him, all unclothed like him, eyes full of fear and helplessness. Corleone stood up and recalled the warmth of the home, the poor but warm home, with the kind eyes of his mother, the figure of his father working in the fields, and his brave and somewhat reckless brother, and the timid and fearful younger sister. Then painful memories took over his mind. That night when the north wind was blowing, a group of robbers, or more accurately the slave traps, attacked their small village, burning straw huts, and the neighing of livestock. The wailing of the villagers, and the tears on the sister's face in the last memory. His father was an honest farmer. When his family's lives were threatened, he bravely took a pitchfork and faced these bastards, but the miracle did not happen. All the villagers who dared to resist were killed. His father was shot through his chest with a sharp arrow. At that moment he felt as if the sky had fallen, he lost his perception of the outside world, he could not hear any sound, he wanted to scream but made no sound, as if a huge rock was pressing on him. His chest was so heavy that he couldn't breathe, and then the remaining villagers were handcuffed, like a group of cattle and sheep being driven to the market. His brother and some villagers left yesterday morning to sell wheat in the market next door, and thus escaped, but his mother, sister, and him were all taken away. Why did all this unfortunately happen to them? They are just honest farmers who pay taxes to the nobles on time, but where is their noble lord at this time? I didn't see any team to rescue these poor people along the way. After dozens of days of trekking, their team grew stronger, and several small villages were attacked. The leader of this slave hunting team is an ugly and fierce-looking bald man with a long scar on his bald head. He often beats and scolds these villagers loudly. His eyes look like in the forest. The wolf is greedy and cruel. He has close to hundreds of people, including some non-human races. Corleone heard the village chief told stories about those non-human races, such as point-eared elves, tall and strong orcs, short-eared dwarves, etc., Kunkai-8 monsters. There are several black ratman crossbowmen and a jackal warrior in the slave-hunting team, and the looks are so daunting. They were taken to a town that is extremely large for Corleone. After all, Corleone has never walked out of his small village. This small town is a huge monster to him, and the streets are crowded and bustling, but they were soon taken to a prison where slaves were kept. His mother and sister were separated from him, and the price of female slaves in the market was often more expensive, especially for women with good-looking looks. During the few days in the cell, the painful memories kept rolling in his mind. He never had a good night's sleep and was constantly awakened by nightmares. There are some adult men detained across from his cell, some of them are villagers in their village, and all of them have a desperate and numb look on their faces. After the 5th day, Corleone and many of his slaves were guarded and rushed to an empty square. When the sun was about to go down, the square was full of people. Some of them were gorgeously dressed and had big bellies. They looked like the noble lords who had been to their villages, and some women were graceful, wearing veils, and wearing extremely explicit clothes. In addition, there are many soldiers wearing black armor and holding spears on both sides to maintain discipline to prevent their slaves from escaping. Then a fat man who looked like a ball walked onto the wooden platform that had just been erected, not knowing whether the wooden boards could bear his weight. He said with a strange tone, "Dear ancestors and ladies, today the Hyena Chamber of Commerce will auction off a group of high-quality slaves. Some of them are farmers who are good at farming, some are craftsmen with ingenuity, and many beautiful ones. Girls, as well as all kinds of inhuman races, I hope everyone can join in." At the beginning, dozens of older men were caught up to the stage. They were all farmers. Among them were a few villagers that Corleone knew. However, the crowd below didn't seem interested in this. Few people offered to bid. It was bought by a farmer for 3 gold coins. Then it was Corleone's turn and the group of teenagers were chased onto the stage. The crowd below was a little excited. Many people were very interested in these immature-faced teenagers on stage to satisfy their evil desires. But Corleone was not selected because of his ordinary appearance. He was relieved and thought he had escaped, but what he didn't expect was that a more tragic situation was waiting for him. Next, a large number of slaves were sold. Corleone also saw a grey-skinned tall giant who was stabbed with several iron rods forcibly on the body of the giant. Chained to control this big guy, his price is also close to the highest in the audience, selling 3,200 gold coins. Among them, the most valuable slave was a human female. She looked fragile, but the fat man yelled about his magical talent. The crowd underneath was suddenly excited. The illusion of restraint was broken. Between these gorgeously dressed people quarrel with each other, and even the People's Congress. Finally, this human girl was bought by a female nobleman at a high price of 4,000 gold coins. Corleone was taken away by a bald old nobleman as a gift. This nobleman bought hundreds of sturdy men because he runs several mines and he needs a lot of miners. After all, the lifespan of miners was too short, and they would consume a batch in a few years. Corleone fell into the hands of this noble master named Marcus because no one cared about it. They were once again shackled with their hands and ankles, and they were taken away from the territory of Master Marcus. On the gorgeous carriage, the bald old nobleman was chatting with the young woman sitting opposite. "Little Annie, you have to be considerate of your father, because the income of the mine has not been very good recently, so your pocket money is temporarily halved. How can it work? Look at the ladies of the Val and Cinero family. They are all wearing the latest dresses. They are all wearing the latest jewelry from the Ballet jewelry store. What about me?" the girl muttered. He opened his mouth and his eyes were red. "My clothes are from the last quarter, how can I go out? I'm afraid they will laugh to death. My dear little baby, I am very sorry, but now is a very time, when our income returns to normal, I promise to give you more pocket money." "Humph, if you don't give it to me now, then I can only ask my mother, and let others know that you, a Zion master, have no money to buy clothes for your daughter." After that, she rolled her eyes. Marcus quickly comforted his baby daughter and said to her, "Fine, I will let these mines increase mining when I go back, and I promise to give you enough pocket money at the end of this month. What do you think?" "Hey, it's almost the same." After that, the girl kissed his father's cheek softly. The sand and dust brought up by the huge team are flying. What kind of fate is waiting for Corleone in front of him? It took a few days for Marcus and his team to return home. His site is in the city of Zalapa, which is located in the foothills of the East Madre Mountains. It is a territory belonging to the Marcus family for 100 miles. The climate in this area is dry. Statistics with a population of close to 220,000, it is famous for producing excellent ore. The kingdom they are in is called the Kingdom of Carlos. The king is Carlos III, a king with a special religious belief. He believes that the property obtained by plundering other countries is a legitimate source of wealth, and he continued to encourage such barbarism during his reign. The behavior of Corleone is in a country that borders the Kingdom of Carlos. In contrast, it is a small country called the Kingdom of Ziama. The current ruler is Queen Ziama, which is one of the few countries with female rulers. The Kingdom of Carlos has a population of tens of millions, while the Kingdom of West Yemar is worth 1 million, which is not an order of magnitude at all. However, it is not only a small country around it, but it is a mutual aid alliance formed by uniting the remaining 7 or 8 small countries. Just barely contend with the Kingdom of Carlos. However, after the death of Carlos II, who admired the way of balance, the cruel Carlos III succeeded to the throne. As soon as he came to power, he killed dozens of ministers who had opposed him and demoted their families to slaves. His 2 younger brothers and 3 older sisters were all executed by him, leaving only a young prince with low intelligence, his little brother Jeffro Carlos. In just 1 year, the country's overall policy was completely changed. He completely abandoned the second king's proposal, the so-called peaceful development of his country by maintaining balance. He once said in public, "We are descendants of the god of the desert, with golden blood flowing on our bodies. How can we be like weak sheep? We have to tear off flesh and blood from others with fangs and teeth. This is a god. Will. And my father, weak, and fair and equal to the small neighboring countries? It's really ridiculous." But he did not directly start the war. He knew that the surrounding countries were small, but the alliance formed could barely compete with him, so he adopted two important policies. The first is the domestic policy of strong soldiers and wealth accumulation, which is crazy. Expanding the size of the army, Carlos Lancers, archers, sentinel guards, Carlos Camel heavy cavalry, Azam archers, and the most powerful legion-bladed fanatic warriors have increased by nearly 2 to 3 times the number. Among them, the sword-bearing fanatic warriors are all faithful of Carlos III. They have followed their masters since childhood. They have the most adequate supplies, the most cruel training, the most terrifying will, and they have also taken the royal secret medicine, which can awaken sleeping. There are ancient blood vessels in the body, so they are all tall and the shortest is about 2 meters. While expanding the army, a large number of nobles in the country have been purged. As long as there is a sign of opposition to Carlos's policy, they will be labeled as treason. With this operation, Carlos has obtained a huge wealth of nearly 2 years of treasury income. The second policy is external. Instead of directly mobilizing troops to attack neighboring countries, he made some troops and mercenaries form bandit groups of all sizes, allowing them to plunder and flow between different small countries and capture them. Slaves, robbed of treasures, burned farmland, and secretly provided support for these bandits with food and weapons, and caused great damage to the economies of various small countries. This is not over yet. Carlos also sent envoys to some small countries, intending to form alliances with them and carve up other countries, but this measure did not get a good return. After all the small countries have seen what he did. Here, they still understand the truth about the death of their lips and teeth. Even so, there are still 2 dog-licking countries planning to join Carlos' alliance. Although the population is only a few 100,000, it is better than nothing. Corleone's village, de Oxioncan, unfortunately became the target of the bandit group, because the queen of the West Yemar kingdom seemed to have a tough attitude towards the outside, which also made her kingdom a key target of attack, although she had some evidence of Carlos' involvement. But she does not dare to completely tear her face at present. She plans to participate in the alliance meeting located in the Cross Basin to discuss countermeasures. All of this is too far away for Corleone. At the moment, their slaves have been assigned to their respective posts. This open-pit iron quarry is located in the mountains, and there is a heavily guarded camp next to the mine. There are also overseers and guards constantly walking around. Corleone was assigned to barracks number 3, and he smelled all kinds of weird sour smells as soon as he entered the door. Dozens of miners were crowded in this narrow house. There were no beds, no furniture, only hay spreading over the floor. The sound of insects and rodents can also be heard in the hay. In barracks number 3, their miner leader status is quite special. He is a dwarf from the Hwosui family. UU reading www.uuganshu.com. At first, Corleone looked at the pudgy back, thinking that other teenagers had been sold here, but when the guy turned his head, it turned out to be a dwarf with a big white beard. This dwarf called himself Joe, and everyone called him Team Leader Joe. He was responsible for arranging the daily work of this team of miners. Joe's voice was so loud that Corleone's head was humming. Joe arranged the newcomers in a queue. This time a total of 6 newcomers were added, making Joe's team 30 people. Among the newcomers are Corleone, a 14-year-old thin boy with black hair and black eyes, a 22-year-old Moftel, a pair of Bob brothers in their early 20s, a 30-year-old farmer John, and a 34-year-old gardener Joe. Hereby, Joe paced back and forth at the tall, short, fat, and thin newcomers before him, and then said, you guys will listen to me. My rules are only to say once. Every day's tasks must be completed, talk less, don't cause trouble, and do more work. Don't even think about running away. If someone in our team escapes and is found, the escaping person will be executed. Everyone in the rest of the team will be punished heavily. The outside of the mine is full of beasts and traps, not to mention there are Master Marka's elite guard. Who wants to die from the dead? Don't drag everyone into the water, can you hear it clearly? The dwarf's rough voice penetrated the room. Clear. Several people replied feebly. There is one more thing for me to remember. Every time Master Marcus or Master came to inspect, he would kneel on the ground honestly. I dug out my eyes and threw it into the mine. Okay, you guys come with me to get the tools, and you will go to the mine to start work later. Each of you novices needs to mine 3 carts of ore every day. After talking, Joe took them to the gate of the warehouse to pick up the tools, and besides a few guards in leather armor guarding the door, there was also a middle-aged man with a serious expression leaning on a chair. Joe looked at him and said, "Dear Butler Brand, I brought a few newcomers to get mining tools." The man said in a frivolous tone, "Joe, your output needs to be improved recently, is there someone who is lazy at work? Lord has just ordered that you will increase your output by 50% every month, you know." "What? Adults, this is impossible. This is just giving us 6 new recruits. Even if they are all skilled miners, it is impossible to suddenly increase so much output. Adults, please do it." Joe's voice became lighter. Said urgently in a humble tone. "Bold, what kind of thing are you? The mere slaves dare to question the Lord's order, want to rebel." As soon as the voice fell, Joe knelt down, Corleone and several other slaves also knelt to the ground. "No, how dare I go against the Lord's will, but this amount is too big, even if we don't eat or drink and keep mining, we won't be able to accomplish so much work." Joe's tone trembled slightly, not knowing whether it was fear or anger. Butler Brand stood up and said loudly, "Little dwarf, you have figured it out for me. I am not asking you, but commanding you. You have no right to refuse. Remember that everything you have belongs to greatness. Lord Marcus. Now I will go back to work after I get the tools, don't drag me." "Humph, what a bunch of stupid slaves." Joe's face flushed red, but he didn't say much, he just lowered his head and took Corleone and the others to pick up the mining pick and the rest of the supplies, and then walked towards the mining area. After reaching the mining site, Corleone saw a large number of slaves working hard to mine the iron ore. They were all dressed in tattered clothes like him. They looked like a group of beggars. There were dozens of guards and hounds around the mine. Joe led them along the way and said nothing, but from the ugly look on his face, he could understand the strong fluctuations in his heart. Corleone was holding a rough-chapped pick, thinking about the ugly face of the previous Brand's housekeeper, which was exactly the same as the tax officer who had come to Deoxiang village to collect taxes. They asked the villagers to slaughter the chickens and ducks at home for them to eat. Pay, and the price of food tax is getting higher and higher. At that time, everyone said that Queen Xiamer was very kind to the people and often opened warehouses to release grain during the disaster years, but the noble lords were very greedy and always liked to increase taxes. Every time the queen gave orders. Converge a bit. Thinking of what the old village chief had said in his mind, he was soon surrounded by pain. Corleone did not shed another tear, because his tears had already shed that night, and now he only has to find someone to return home. His thoughts, as well as the endless desire for revenge deep in my heart. Corleone has been different from other kids since he was a child. He doesn't like chasing and playing around. What he hates most is that his elder brother pats him on the head. He thinks that is naive, even though his brother is 5 years older than him. What he loves most is to ask the village chief's grandfather about some adventure stories when he was young, and to chat with those caravans who occasionally stayed in the village. Under difficult living conditions, he is a precocious child. Did not stop. Sometimes under the stars at night, he would fantasize about being a great knight, defeating evil demon kings, and saving beautiful princesses. He has a stronger curiosity than other children, but these beautiful fantasies are gone forever, and only the mixed emotions of sadness, fear, and anger remain in his heart. When he was reminiscing, someone slapped his head gently. It turned out that Joe was standing in front of him, staring straight at him. "Hey, what are you thinking about? Don't hurry to work. It's really troublesome to see that your small body can't even dig a cart of mines a day," Xiao Chahu said with a stare. Corleone responded quickly, "I will work hard." Joe shook his head disdainfully and said, "I don't know what the master thinks. It's nonsense that even a weak person like you is brought to work. Don't say anything anymore. Now everyone has to mine a lot of iron ore. You learn the mining skills of those veterans. Otherwise, you may die in this mine within a month." Up! The strong supervisor standing uphill came over with a whip and shouted, "What are you guys doing together? Don't hurry up." Now everyone Corleone had no choice but to pick up the mining picks and start to work. The daily workload of the miners had just risen since the sun had risen and had to mine until midnight. At this time, many torches were also erected on the mine. Everyone eats 2 meals a day. There are only brown bread mixed with gravel and muddy well water. Only the well-performing group can get an extra meal every month. After a hard day's work, Corleone felt the pain in his arm. Even so, he barely picked up a cart full of ore. It is conceivable that tomorrow's amount will be even less. At the end of the mining registration, Dwarf Joe was severely scolded by the butler Brand, and was rewarded with 2 whips. However, thinking that such progress could not meet the requirements of Master Marcus at all, so the helpless butler could only choose to go back and report the situation. There were 2 more scars on Joe's back, but there was no painful expression on his face, as if he had become accustomed to it. After returning to his residence, a few miners did not know where to take out simple herbs and apply them to Joe's on the wound. Corleone knew that Joe was punished, also part of his responsibility, because the current requirement is that each person should mine at least 4 carts of iron ore every day, but he only completed 1 cart. It can be said that he has dragged the team back. No one blamed him. In the third group, Joe's prestige was high. The other miners respected him, and the new miners were all honest, so they didn't say much. This is also Corleone's luck. What he didn't know was that he would have no such good luck to be divided into other groups. A member of the barbarian tribe was captured as a slave and thrown into the arena. In a battle, a leg was cut off by the opponent. Based on the principle of waste utilization, he was sold to the mine of Master Marcus. He is a person who advocates violence. On the first day he came, he beat the former leader of the first group severely, and then took the position of the leader. He did the least work every day, but he took the most when he ate. Do you want to say that the guards and stewards of the mine will take care of it? They don't, as long as they don't let slaves make trouble and ensure the output of iron ore, it will be the same who is the head of the group. Joe is completely different. He tries to take care of every miner in the group as much as possible. Although he has a bad temper and often speaks loudly, he never beats his members. You must know the power of the dwarf. The little 1, 2, or 3 adult men can't beat him when he really started. And Joe's mining ability is also very amazing. This can be said to be a racial talent. His unreserved church team members have the least effort mining skills, and each of them retains a part of their strength every day instead of exhausting all their strength. If everyday mining is exhausted, the miners in good health will not survive for 2 or 3 years. They are slaves, but they don't have time off. They only work day after day. Thanks to Joe's help, their team each member has the longest survival time and the largest amount of mining, so he can occasionally get a little bit of trivial benefits from the butler. But so what? After all, you can't get rid of the status of a slave. After finally swallowing the stone-like brown bread, Corleone was full of sleepiness and wanted to fall asleep on the straw. At this time, Joe came over and pulled him up. Corleone thought Joe wanted to beat him up. Struggling quickly. "Don't mess with the brat, I'll stretch it for you, otherwise you won't even be able to pick up the mining pick tomorrow, what a fool." Corleone responded with embarrassment, "Thank you, Grandpa Joe." "Who is your grandpa?" "I'm still very young. I'm only 46 years old. I really don't have any eyesight. Just call me Uncle Chiao, don't try hard, you little guy, you can learn to order." Chiao mumbled. Under Joe's actions, Corleone felt hot in his shoulders and arms, but not as painful as before, and felt much better. After thanking him, he fell asleep deeply, mainly because he was too tired, not only physically, but also psychologically. Joe looked at Corleone while he was asleep, and sighed softly. After chatting with several other miners, he fell into a deep sleep. What they didn't know was that something happened this night that would change the pattern of the entire continent in the future. A shooting star crossed the horizon, and only a few people noticed it. Some people thought the yellow shooting star was a symbol of disaster. If someone can observe carefully with astronomical equipment, they will find that this is not some cosmic dust or meteorite at all, but a huge cube, not knowing what metal is made of, and there is a yellow smiling face on each side. Then the shooting star gradually disappeared into the sky. Reading www.yunsha.com seemed to burn out, but in fact the cube became smaller and smaller, and finally only the size of a grape. And the place where it fell was over the mine where Corleone was located. The cube flew straight towards a house. It passed through the roof easily like no entity, making no sound or making any noise. Light. The cube hovered over Corleone's little head, and slowly merged into his head a few seconds later. Corleone was still having nightmares at this time, but soon his dream was covered by a huge yellow occupied by smiley faces. Corleone found that he had a series of dreams. At first it was a burning village and a scorched corpse, but a huge smiling face appeared in front of him. The smiling face said strange things in an extremely cold tone. Corleone found that he could understand it, and he still remembered it clearly. At that time, the smiling face said, "You are welcome to use the version 3.0 system developed by the of Games. This system is jointly developed by the Play with Feet group and the of Games Loki. This system is developed by Fighting. The mode of integrating with life development provides you with an unparalleled gaming experience. Please check the specific operation method by yourself. You are the only player randomly selected in this world. Please use the system reasonably. You can send a feedback form of system experience to the customer service after you advance to the gods. Finally, I wish you a happy use." After these words were over, the huge yellow smiley face turned into a scarlet crying face, and then disappeared, and in Corleone's mind, a piece of parchment suspended in the air appeared. This parchment paper can be summoned in the real world, there is no entity, nor can it be seen by others, only Corleone can see the parchment. On the parchment, there are 4 black circles in the middle, which are written attributes, talents, skills, and weapon proficiency. Corleone is very curious. After all, he has no education, just learned part from the village chief. The words and numbers, but he can understand all the content on the parchment, as if he was born to be the same. He touched the first circle first, and the picture on the parchment changed. A lifelike self-portrait appeared on the paper. The picture was Corleone's full-body picture, but he was not wearing clothes, and was on the right side of the picture. Written some text, name, Mike Corleone, pure human, no special blood, master occupation, slave, no bonus, life occupation, miner level 0, know how to wield a mining pick, awesome. Strength, 2, weak, I'm afraid I can't beat a dog, agility, 4, slower action, average nerve response speed, intelligence, 5, average level of normal humans, charm, 5, mediocre appearance, inconspicuous when thrown into the crowd, momentum, lucky, Corleone basically understands the role of these attributes, and also understands that the attributes show the various strength states of his body, and these attributes can be increased through his own exercise and gaining attribute points. He found that his strength was really very low. On the one hand, he was born with a relatively poor physique. On the other hand, he suffered from severe malnutrition. Corleone couldn't wait to check other content. He felt that he might have actually encountered a miracle. After all, he had never had such a real dream. How could all this not make him excited? And the second circle is talent, iron bone, 0, enhance physical strength and resistance, strike, 0, enhanced combat damage, strong throw, 0, enhanced throwing damage, strong bow, 0, enhanced crossbow damage, weapon mastery, 1, make the weapon proficiency increase faster, increase the upper limit of proficiency, the current online is 60, shield defense, 0, enhance the mastery of the shield, running, 0, increase running speed, riding, 0, improve riding speed and control. Riding and shooting, 0, improve the control of the crossbow when riding, plunder, 0, attributes, proficiency, materials, etc. will be plundered randomly from dead enemies, magic, 0, enhance the damage and mastery of spells, tracking, 0, found the enemy's information from the trail, tactics, 0, mastery of battlefield layout and strategy, detection, 0, enhance the detection of the enemy, healing injuries, 0, enhance the treatment and healing of injuries, engineering, 0, enhance the mastery of territory construction and siege equipment, persuasiveness, 1, enhance the lobbying ability and trust in others, domination, 0, enhance the morale and discipline of the troops, transaction, 0, enhance the ability to appreciate items and business acumen. It seems that most of these talents are related to combat, which also makes Corleone understand the possible role of the system. After all, he is only the offspring of a farmer. It is basically impossible to avenge those bandits if he does not have enough strength. At this time, he didn't even think about avenging the nobles, because he didn't know that Carlos Kingdom was the man behind the bandit group. His thinking at this time was still at the level of small farmers who did not leave their homes. Maybe he has any thoughts about the nobles. After all, the environment he lives in is to respect the nobles. Next, he checked the third circle again. The skills displayed above were, combat skills, none life skills, farming level 2, mining level 0, field survival level 1, can be said to be very rudimentary. Survival in the wild is a skill he acquired by picking wild fruits and catching small animals. The same skills can be enhanced through exercise and skill points. The last circle is weapon proficiency, which is written like this: 1-handed weapon proficiency, 10 two-handed weapon proficiency, 10 long weapon proficiency, 5 bow and arrow proficiency, 0 crossbow proficiency, 0 throwing proficiency, 15 firearms proficiency, 0. The higher the proficiency, the higher his mastery of the weapons he uses. If he learns the corresponding skills, the more powerful the skills will be. After checking, I returned to the first page of the parchment. In addition to the 4 circles, there was a colorful small bag in the lower right corner with the word gift package written on it, so Corleone clicked on it. Then a new text appeared on the parchment: Dear player, you got the novice gift package reward. The specific rewards are as follows: 3 attribute points, 1 talent point, 20 proficiency points, and novice weapons iron dagger *1. These rewards are very generous for Corleone. Take 3 attribute points as an example. If he uses all his strength, his current strength is no different from that of an ordinary adult male, and he has also obtained a dagger. I just don't know if I can get it out of my dream. When Corleone was still suffering from gains and losses, reading www.yuyugonshu.com, his dream suddenly shattered. He opened his eyes suddenly, and found that he was still in the simple room, and there was a sharp dagger in his hand. Which made him understand that he was definitely not dreaming, but that a miracle really happened to him. He hurriedly hid the dagger in the straw, but thought that it was not safe enough, so he cautiously slipped out, planning to bury the dagger in a hidden place, and when he went out, Joe opened his eyes and looked suspiciously. Corleone walked outside. Joe was worried that Corleone was thinking about running away. He thought that Corleone was only a 14-year-old boy after all, and he was still a bit naive. If he knew that running away was a dead end, he quickly followed up quietly. Corleone found that there were guards standing guard on the nearby sentry tower, so he ran towards the latrine with an idea. He hid the dagger in the cracks between the rocks beside the latrine. Joe was relieved when he saw Corleone running away from the latrine, but under the reflection of the moonlight, he suddenly found that Corleone had a dagger in his hand. Where did this weapon come from? You should know that when they came in, they all had undergone a rigorous body search. How could they miss a dagger? This made Joe a strong interest in Corleone. And after hiding the dagger, Corleone pretended to finish using the toilet, looked around and found no one and then returned to the residence. At the same time, Joe hurried back to avoid being discovered by Corleone. The next day was light, and Corleone and all his slaves were awakened by Joe's loud voice, and immediately had to return to the mine to start work. At this time, Corleone's complexion was very different from yesterday. He thought he is the one who is favored by the game. He is confident that he can get rid of the current predicament, and his desire for revenge is even stronger. What he didn't notice was that Joe looked at him with a completely different expression from yesterday, showing a thoughtful expression. The great master Marcus decided to increase the amount of mining by 40% instead of the original 50%. The team with the best performance can get a reward of a pork chop every month. Brand Butler stood on the slope, reading aloud the Lord's command. The slaves underneath suddenly whispered to each other. After all, the workload has increased so much at once. I am afraid that a lot of people will be exhausted. Of course, some people have shown longing eyes. After all, it is a pork chop. They don't know how long it has been. Haven't eaten meat. Corleone was the same as some people. After hearing the pork chops, he couldn't help but swallowed his saliva. The best food he had eaten as a child was boiled eggs. Their pigs were all sold for money after they were raised. Opportunity to eat meat. There are a total of 5 teams underneath, with a total number of close to 160 people. One of the team leaders is the barbarian Zabu. His face still has an expression of disdain. No matter how much work increases, he actually digs. Those who are not obedient are the least. Whoever is not obedient is a punch and kick. The group leader of the second group is a middle-aged man with a bitter melon face. When he heard this news, his face became even more ugly. The group leaders of the fourth group and the fifth group also showed embarrassment, and really didn't treat them at all. Slaves as humans. The leader of the 5 groups was a strong, muscular, strong man. His name was Facnet. He was once an infantry instructor. Because he accidentally offended the nobles, the whole family was demoted to slaves, and he was here. The mine has been there for 5 years. The butler of Brand yelled, "Okay, shut up. The Lord has shown his kindness to you humble slaves, so hurry back to mine." Fafner glanced at the dwarf Joe, and then at the barbarian Zab, and found that neither of them wanted to express it, so he closed his mouth and let the group's miners follow him and leave after a long sigh. Joe blew a loud whistle. Corleone and the other members of the 3 groups all walked to the mine. "These gang of nobles really don't give us a way to survive," a miner said to his companion while mining. "Hey, everything is destined, so don't talk nonsense, hurry up and save some energy to mine. What a fate! Why do some people are born nobles, but we are poor slaves, and our lives are in the hands of these big men? What are you two talking nonsense? Dig now!" Joe shouted at the 2 miners. And he happened to pass by an overseer above, and looked at the slaves who worked honestly below, showing a satisfied expression. He glanced at Corleone's thin body again, and his expression became a little ugly. The overseer took the whip and strode towards Corleone, and said as he walked, "Boy, you know that you dig too little. I am afraid that even the goblins dig more than you. In this batch of slaves, in addition to the dwarf Joe, there are two non-human races, one is the slave Ratman's Hizzy, and the other is the forest goblin Stupid. Although they are small, they are mining the amount is still barely up to the standard." Joe greeted this scene quickly, and said in a humble tone, "My lord, don't worry, our group will definitely not lose weight. I will take care of this little devil's job." Joe cursed at Corleone again, "Why are you stupid? Don't dig it quickly, otherwise you won't want to eat dinner today." "My lord, don't worry, I promise to take care of this little thing." The supervisor then stopped and said, "Well, little man, I will carefully check the weight at the end of the month. Don't let the people on it disappoint." Seeing the distant figure of the overseer, there was a fierce light in Joe's eyes, which disappeared for a while. "You will follow me all the time, follow me my specific movements, understand?" Joe said to Corleone. "Understood, Uncle Joe, just now." "Thank you." At this time, Corleone had not added the skills and talents he had obtained. He didn't want to be found abnormal right away, so he followed Joe all the time and made plans later. For the next 3 months, there were no waves of daily work. Everyone was exhausted every day. Among them, 2 older slaves could not sustain the intensity of the work. They were exhausted and died in the mine. His body was simply buried in a nearby waste pit. During this period of time, Corleone has gained a lot. First of all, his life occupation miner has become level 2. In the process of mining iron ore day after day, he found that he has gained life experience and can use it to upgrade the professional level. In addition, he has gained a lot of hearings from Joe during this time, not only from the outside world, but more importantly for him is that Joe taught him a lot of mineral knowledge and mining know-how, which also made him better. Quickly reached the level 2 miner. Level 2 miner has a very important bonus, that is power +1. In addition, in the process of mining, his power attribute has actually gained training and also increased by 1 point. Yul.Yunsha.com. Then he added a little attribute point of the reward to the power. At present, his strength is 5 points, which is the same as the strength of ordinary men. The strength attribute not only affects the size of strength, but also affects personal endurance, resilience, resistance to disease, etc. It can be said that this makes him completely reborn. Joe also discovered Corleone's changes. He didn't say anything, and when reporting, Corleone's ore dug would be said to have been dug by Joe. This was what Joe asked Corleone to do. He said that the purpose was temporary. Keep it secret. At this time, Corleone still has 2 attribute points, 1 talent point and 20 weapon proficiency points are not used. He plans to keep them first, and then adjust them when needed. Uncle Joe, you said that the nobles usually eat roast suckling pig, honey white bread, and drink wine. Have you tried these? Of course, I was also a senior miner of the Hwosui clan back then, and I was also a well-known figure in my hometown. Who doesn't know my name? Oh? What was your name then? Joe took a mouthful of black bread and proudly said, "Hey, at that time my name was Treasure Digger, because the quality of the gems I dug was very high, so I was recognized by everyone." Corleone sat beside Joe and said, "Wow, Uncle Joe, you are so amazing. I heard that the wine your dwarves make is the best. Is this true?" "Ha ha ha, that is of course true. The spirits and beer of our dwarves are the best in the world, with unique flavors and good taste. They are much better than the drinks brewed by your humans. I really miss the past. I can drink 5 dwarves at the wine table, and I have been in this ghost place for 8 years without knowing it." Chiao sighed melonly. "When I came out to fight, I vowed that I would become a strong guardian of the ore. At that time, I chose to follow a team of mercenaries on adventures. I have seen the mortal giant city of Skaven. Their powerful musket guard is fascinating, and it can be said to be able to compete with our dwarves' firearms. I also crossed the towering mountains and passed by the wood elves. Their wilderness of kings. The exquisite architectural style is impressive. The weapons made by these pointed ears are too fancy. How can our dwarves be practical? It's big, thick, and strong. Your human empire is not bad, and the engineering academy of the Holy Onyx Empire is world-renowned. Of course, we dwarves are indispensable. Many dwarves who have been expelled by the Dwarf Engineers Association have contributed extremely high power in it. Joe paused for a moment and then continued, the last stop of my adventure was to go to the Desert Kingdom. I heard that there were dwarves who discovered the ancient ruins. Unfortunately, our team encountered desert bandits and was almost wiped out. After the ordeal returned to the oasis, he was watched by the slavery team. If my team is still there, I will never be afraid of the beasts, but I was alone at the time. After killing 3 sand thief, I was still captured by them. I was taken away by a slave merchant. After a while, I was sold here to mine iron ore. Boy, the outside world is so vast, countless opportunities and treasures are waiting for me to explore, just give me a chance. Oh, forget it. Joe turned his head and asked Corleone, if you had a chance to go back, what would you do? Will you continue to be a farmer? Corleone clasped his arms and said firmly, I am going to find my mother and sister. Although I know the chance is very slim, I will never give up. Then Corleone gritted his teeth and said, in addition, I want to find the damned band of robbers. They killed my father and killed so many innocent villagers. I will definitely avenge them. Joe replied, good point, kid. No matter how long it takes, you should find a way to kill your enemy, even if it takes a lifetime, it's worth it. Next, I will take time to teach you some simple fighting skills, I hope it will help you in your future revenge. Joe's method is to use the mining pick as a weapon. As a senior dwarf miner, the mining pick is not only a mining tool, but also a surprising weapon. Can be said to be a must-have for home travel, mining, and digging. A dwarf who doesn't know how to use a mining pick is not a dwarf at all, and Joe makes Corleone subconsciously incorporate various actions and techniques into his daily mining. After another 3 months, Corleone found that the various information on the parchment had changed a lot. The miner's level had not changed, but the talent strike was changed to level 1, which could slightly increase the combat damage. In the weapon control, the two-handed weapon proficiency reached 32 points, which can be said to be a very big improvement. The most important thing is that he has mastered a new combat skill dwarf pickaxe, level 1, inherited from the dwarf Hwosui clan. Flexibly use the pickaxe in his hand to block the enemy and defeat the enemy. After reaching level 5, you can comprehend special skills. Corleone also decided to add all 2 points of attribute value to his power, so that his power reached 7 points, which can be said to be stronger than some ordinary human fighters. The disadvantage is that his appetite has also become larger. He has to think ways to obtain other food sources. This includes all kinds of insects and mice. Although it is very disgusting, Joe said to him at the time, little guy, you can't eat enough brown bread on that bit of brown bread now. Fortunately, the mountains here are rich. Don't look at the green caterpillar's resources, but it's very nutritious. At that time, Corleone's face was very ugly, but he had to bite the bullet and swallow the bug with the thick little finger. The taste might not be forgotten in this life. Another rich source of meat is rats, but the biggest problem with eating rats is that the fire will be spotted by guards or supervisors, but I don't know if it's the supervisor's acquiescence or something. Sometimes I just open one eye when I see it. There are even guards who will watch as a monkey show. Jokes, these lowly slaves actually eat rat meat. Although many people ridiculed them, Corleone doesn't care. Anyway, it's all meat. Even if you eat it last time, you make a profit. In the past few months, the ownership of those pork chops also caused quite a stir among the slaves. In 2 of them, the third group won the first place in mining volume. Dwarf Joe took the small pork chop. With sharp gravel, evenly distributed to the members of the group. The barbarian Zabu also got pork chops twice, but he was more overbearing and ate it by himself. At that time, the two newly added slaves protested loudly, but after being beaten severely, they didn't dare to have any ideas. Today is Corleone's 6th month as a slave miner. At the end of the month, the butler of Brand should announce which group is the first, so as to reward them with a pork chop. But Butler Brand is now busy dealing with a more important thing, that is, Lord Marcus' son, will come to inspect the iron mine this morning. Lord Marcus is an old man, and he is still a couple. When he was 50 years old, his wife was pregnant with his child. The boy was Jefferson Marcus and his daughter was Anne Marcus. This pair of children can be said to be his heart. Now that his son is 16 years old and he has entered his own property for the first time, Marcus has begun to develop his son's management skills and the obligations he should be aware of as a lord. At this time, Butler Brand was standing upright at the door of the camp, waiting for the arrival of the young master. At noon, when the Butler Brand was standing with sore legs and feet, he finally saw a gorgeous carriage with the emblem of the Marcus family and several cavalry rushing towards him. He quickly brought a few of his men to greet him, and before he could speak, a cavalry on the opposite side put a machete on his neck. This knight was wearing a silk headscarf, covering his head while covering the lower half of his face. He looked very young and didn't wear any armor. Unlike the other knights who wore lined armor, his clothes, the trousers, are made of fine silk, and there are several gold bracelets on the wrists. His body still exudes a strong fragrance of perfume. Butler Brand smelled it. The smell should be the precious incense called blood dragon wood. Then the identity of the person in front of him is ready to emerge. This must be Master Jefferson Marcus, the only future heir of the Marcus family. Why don't you kneel when you see this young master? The knight's immature voice revealed an unquestionable attitude. Butler Brand hurried to his knees, and respectfully said to Master Jefferson, "You are welcome to visit the iron ore mine. The people are looking forward to seeing you, Master." "Oh, what can I see in a broken mine? If it weren't for my father's order, I would still be at the Blue Rose Theatre today. The old man is really troublesome." Butler Brand didn't dare to talk too much, but just knelt on the ground honestly with a few other men. "Why are you still kneeling? Why are you so stupid if you don't lead the way for this young master?" "Master, you are right. Look at my pig brain. Go here." A group of people rushed to the mine unhurriedly, and the sound of young women laughing from time to time in that gorgeous carriage. The butler of Brand muttered in his heart, "Why did the young master lead the team to patrol, and also brought a few women? Is this afraid of coming for an outing? It's still a hairy boy after all." The butler was really right. Master Jefferson really didn't take the inspection seriously. After all, he was just a casual walk. As for the management and income of the mine, he had no interest at all. You must know that Master Jefferson thinks he is. Elegant people simply dismiss these things. He was covering his nose and mouth, because the smell after entering the mine was very unpleasant. When he dismounted and walked, he even stepped on a piece of horse dung, which made him very angry. So he chatted with the butler Brand and several other managers, and then returned to the carriage. The 4 knights who accompanied him guarded the 4 corners of the carriage. Then there was a heart-pounding mixed male and female sound from the carriage, but the knights outside the carriage did not have any expressions on their faces. It seemed that they should be the elites cultivated by the family. On the other side of the mining field, hundreds of slaves began to clamor, because according to the usual practice, the butler Brand should announce who is the first in the group, but the butler has been busy all day. I have forgotten about this matter a long time ago. At this time, the sound in the carriage stopped. The young master seemed to have heard the movement in the distance, so he twisted his waist and walked out of the carriage, and said to the knight who was guarding him, "What happened? I wonder what happened to my master." "Master, let me get to know it," the strong knight-headed said. After a while, Butler Brand ran over with the cavaliers from the warehouse. Before that, he was still sorting out the report for the most recent month, intending to pass it to Master Jefferson for review. I saw the butler panting and said, "Master, it should be the mine who is waiting for the meat. It's not a big problem." At this time, he remembered, and after finishing speaking, he commanded one of his subordinates and asked him to carry pork chops. "Go to the mining site." Master Jefferson was very interested in this, and while tidying up his messy clothes, he said, "I also want to go over and take a look, but I heard that there are dwarves and goblins among our slaves." "How can this be done, Master? You are a golden body, how can you let those slaves stain your eyes?" The butler quickly responded. "I can do whatever I want, don't talk nonsense, why do you people always forget who you are?" Master Jefferson raised his voice. "Understood, Master, I will let the barracks bring more guards." "Hey! Master, wait a minute." Before the steward had finished speaking, Master Jefferson turned on his horse, and the other 4 knights followed suit. The movements of the young master are all running towards the mine. "Damn it, you guys run quickly to keep up, let all the guards of the barracks pass by, hurry up. If there is something wrong with the young master, all of you will lose your head." The butler is anxious like an ant on a hot pot. He did not expect the young master to be so impulsive. Although there are many guards on the mine, he still can't rest assured. Master Jefferson and his escorts quickly rushed to the scene. When he arrived at the scene, the slaves on the found that there seemed to be nobles coming, and their voices became quiet. 20 minutes ago, the situation in the mine was actually caused by the barbarian Zabu. He felt very dissatisfied when he saw that no one came to send any meat for a long time, so he urged others to shout, which finally led to this scene. When Zabu saw Master Jefferson, his eyes immediately became red. Jefferson did not wear a headscarf, but rushed over. When he was on the horse, Zabu recognized him. As for why Zabu knew him Jefferson, then we have to talk about it 3 years ago. At that time, Zabu broke a leg, and his brother the barbarian Tashi was interrupted with an arm. It was said before that they were sold to the arena, but what is the use of a gladiator with broken hands and feet? So he was sold to slave merchants again. At that time, Lord Marcus took his son to the slave market to buy slaves. He planned to buy a few female slaves to serve as servants for his son. Com bought another batch of mining slaves, and both Zabu and Tashi were bought at that time. Marcus is a person who loves small and cheap, even the disabled can mine, and the price is much cheaper. On the way back to the slaves, the young Master Jefferson had a lot of playfulness, not only constantly interacting with the female slaves, but also getting out of the car to tease the miners and slaves. As a result, the grumpy Tashi couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of sputum. Jefferson's head. At that time, Jefferson burst into tears, yelling to kill this sordid slave. Marcus felt a bit wasteful at first, and he planned to let his subordinates use dozens of whips to finish it. But Jefferson just disagreed, and said that he was so insulted as a noble, how could this slave survive? He also drew out his knife, planning to do it himself. Now, Marcus has no choice but to agree to his son's request. After all, he is very fond of his son. A slave is dead. If he dies, he will die. So Jefferson stabbed Tashi with dozens of knives, and eventually Tashi fell in a pool of blood, and the body was thrown aside without being buried. Zabu was very angry, yelling at the barbarian's foul language, and was greeted with a whipping. After being stunned alive, when he woke up again, he found that he was in this mine. You must know that in the tradition of barbarians like Zabu, the dead should be burned by fire, and the ashes should be scattered into the depths of the mountains, so that they can enter the temple and become an immortal warrior. And if the dead person exposes the corpse to the wilderness, then his soul will wander in the wilderness and never return. This is really jealous when the enemy meets. Zab recognized Jefferson, but Jefferson did not recognize him. After all, he was just a slave. Who would deliberately remember? Zabu almost broke his teeth, but he restrained his impulse. He planned to contact Dwarf Joe and the other team leaders. At this time, Master Jefferson spoke. "What's wrong? It was not very lively just now. Why did I stop as soon as I came? A bunch of cheap bones dare to make noise, it's it. And you, where do you humble slave look? Master, can I look straight at you? Drag him over." Jefferson pointed to an older man with grey hair and looking a little demented. The old man said. One of his guards immediately turned over and dismounted and dragged the old man over. Jefferson walked towards the old man and drew a dagger inlaid with exquisite gems from his waist. "Old thing, today I will teach you a lesson, let you know what status is the nobleman, and what status you are." After he finished speaking, he asked the guard to fix the old man's body and pierced the dagger at one of the old man's eyes. Some of the slaves under showed angry expressions, some were numb, and some were trembling with fright, and Zabu had quietly walked to Joe's side, and Fakni had also gathered with them. Zabu said first, "This guy is Marca's son, I think our chance is here." Joe asked quietly, "Can you do it?" Fakner said quickly, "What are you waiting for? If this guy is Marca's son and hijacks him, we will have a chance to escape. I have had enough." Then Zabu said nothing, just nodded. "I prepare my brothers, and when I blow the whistle, they all start together. The most important thing is to catch the little nobleman, understand?" Joe said. "Then do it, life and death depends on the destiny, the of courage bless." Fakni said. Zabu clenched his fists and made a movement on his chest to show that he was ready to fight. Then several people walked towards the members of the group, and kept whispering, "Jefferson Uphill is still torturing the innocent old man, from his excited look you can understand how cruel this guy is. Haha, humble slave, now I know I'm afraid, yes, my gloves are dirty." The old man fell to the ground and wailed, and Jefferson wiped the dagger on the old man's body. At this time, a sharp whistle sounded, and all the slaves underneath suddenly rushed towards Jefferson and them. The 4 guards quickly drew their scimitars, took off the shields from their backs, and guarded Jefferson. The guards who were watching the play found that something was wrong and rushed over. Not far away were the late butlers and dozens of guards. A few arrows were shot towards the team of slaves. It was the archer from the guard tower. In the blink of an eye, several slaves were shot. Some of them fell directly, and some continued to rush forward. Hundreds of slaves were not completely united. Several slaves were still standing stupidly on the spot, not knowing what had happened, and a few were running in other directions, intending to escape from the chaos. Corleone also received Joe's message, and rushed forward without hesitation with the mining pick. He knew the opportunity was here. Among them, the dull slaves turned directly into live targets and were shot to death by the archers of the sentry tower. The barbarian Zabu was at the forefront of the slave team. Although one leg was replaced by wood, he was angry. Make him look like a wild bull running wild. He rushed the fastest and most fiercely, and immediately fought with the guard leader. These 4 guards are the elite of the Marcas family, known as the Desert Veteran Cavalry, and are good at using machetes and bucklers. These cavalry also reacted very quickly. One of them kicked the old man away from the ground. Everyone guarded Jefferson in a quadrilateral shape. Jefferson was also taken aback by the slave's sudden action, and he couldn't even speak for a while. At this time, Joe did not rush over in a hurry, but hid in the crowd, relying on the advantage of his height, intending to give the opposite side a little bit of shade. The slaves and the guards fought together, and on both sides were a steady stream of guards and hounds. Butler Brand saw the scene in front of him, and almost everyone fainted. He yelled directly to the sound and let all the guard hurried up to rescue the young master. Several slaves have been beheaded in the periphery. Some were stabbed to death by spears, and some were hacked to death by daggers and scimitars. As for those slaves who were clever and ran around, they were basically the fastest to die. The most anxious point in the battle is the battle between Zabu and others and the desert veteran cavalry. Zabu and others have two advantages. One is the determination to fight desperately. You must know that if they fail, the result will be all executed. Absolutely not. There will be a second end. Second, all the cavalry on the opposite side did not mount their horses, and the desert veteran cavalry had no horses, and their combat effectiveness had been reduced by more than half, but even so, their combat effectiveness should not be underestimated. The leading cavalry kept wielding a scimitar, with a sharp blade like a crescent moon, holding a round shield in his other hand, constantly resisting the slave's attacks, and the expensive armor on his body also helped him offset the damage. Less hurt. On the other hand, the slaves are not very optimistic. Their weapons are only the mining picks in their hands. The quality is also worrying. After all, the mines still guard against them and will not give them good quality picks. Just use a broken one and replace it. Therefore, in the battle, the slaves' weapons were very disadvantaged. Many people's pickaxes were broken by scimitars, but the cavalry on the opposite side were not in a hurry to kill. Retreat, intending to join the guards behind. Zabu saw that the scale of victory would fall to the opposite side if he continued like this. He roared and his whole person looked bigger. The explosive muscles greatly improved his speed and strength. This is the unique talent of barbarians. By taking secret medicine and the blood of wild beasts from an early age, they can activate the blood of ancient barbarians and gain violent enhancement. The price is that they will become useless in a short period of time after the violent. At the same time, in the process of raging, their sanity will gradually lose, and if they have poor control, they will even become brainless beasts. Zabu threw out the mine pick in his hand, and then slammed his fist on the knight's buckler. His hand bones were broken and blood splashed, but he didn't care at all, he just wanted to pinch the little white face in the middle of the neck. The knight leader felt tremendous pressure. He swung a scimitar and slashed towards Zabu. Zabu had no time to dodge, and a huge wound was cut on his chest, but he still attacked frantically. On the other side, the former infantry instructor Fakni had killed 2 ordinary guards. He picked up a short spear and threw a short sword to Zabu by the way. After Zabu barely avoided the attack of the knight, he grasping the thrown dagger. By this time dozens of slaves had been killed. Seeing that morale was getting lower and lower, fortunately, the breach was opened in time, that is, one of the cavalrymen was killed and his knee was hit by Joe. Joe's blow can be said to be extremely harsh. The handle of the entire mine pick was broken in half. It can be seen that his strength was so strong, and the knight's leg was stiffly beaten and sunken in the opposite direction. Immediately after he fell, his face was smashed by a few mine picks. Joe picked up his scimitar and rushed towards the other knight. This is Corleone's first battle. He feels that he should be very scared. After all, killing chickens and killing people feel completely different, but in a frenetic, hand-to-hand environment where everyone is caught in a frenzy, he is just tight. Follow the actions of the slave team. At the beginning, his mind was still thinking of Joe's instructions, tell him not to be too protruding, not to rush to the front, but to attack the enemy's lower 3 lanes, and when the real battle happened, all these words were in Corleone. Disappeared in his mind. Can be regarded as a kind of group blind obedience. The roar, the crisp sound of sword collision, the screaming sound, the pungent smell of blood, the scene of amputated limbs, the sum of these senses makes Corleone gradually lose his sober consciousness. He just kept waving the mine pickaxe in his hand. He didn't know that his pickaxe was broken, but relying on the strength far beyond ordinary people, he still swung desperately using the dwarf pickaxe technique, and even a slave was killed. He unfortunately hit the head. But at this time the field was already in a state of extreme anxiety, and no one cared whether he accidentally injured his own person. Corleone and a guard on the opposite side slashed, and the guard's short spear pierced Corleone's forearm, and he reacted. Only a piece of the broken handle of the mining pick was left in his hand. The guard in front of him was about to pull out the short spear and poke Corleone's head. At this time, Corleone grabbed the short spear and dragged the guard to the front. Then he hit the guard's chest with a head hammer. The guard on the opposite side couldn't stand firmly and sat on the ground, while Corleone drew out the short spear from his arm and pierced the guard's face without hesitation. The short spear pierced the guard's mouth directly, and then Corleone drew the short spear out like a okay person. The red and white thing splashed on his face, but he continued to pounce on the next enemy without expression. The wound on his arm was bleeding continuously, but he didn't feel any pain at this moment, just kept piercing his weapon. On the other side, Joe and Zabu are close to success. 2 cavalrymen have been killed, and the other is also seriously injured. Only the cavalry leader is slightly injured. The guards around surrounded the slaves, and the threat of archers was constant. Fortunately, the archers in this mining area were relatively mediocre, so they couldn't hurt Joe or Zabu. If there was a marksman here, the current situation would be completely different. The other living slaves struggled with the guards desperately, just to give Joe and the others a chance. The guards on the opposite rushed into the circle of the knights several times, but were quickly killed by the slaves or forced out of the circle. During this period, it can be seen that Corleone has already killed several guards. Except for a few group leaders, he is the one who killed the most enemies. At this time, there was only a vague flame in his mind, which seemed to be a burning straw house. There seemed to be billowing black smoke hovering in the sky. The cavalry leader still did not protect the young master after all. Jefferson was pulled aside by Faulkner, and he put his sword on Jefferson's neck. "Stop it all! Your young master's life is in my hands. If you hear it, stop it!" Faulkner shouted. "Whoever is doing it, I will kill this noble boy." Joe's voice was still so loud, it almost covered the whole fighting scene. Now the butler Brand was in a hurry. He didn't have much fighting capacity. He was watching him all the time. When he saw Jefferson being held hostage, he hurriedly shouted, "Stop it all! I order you to stop!" Finally, the fighting between the slave and the guard stopped. At this time, there were only less than 40 slaves standing on the field, and there were close to 50 guards. According to statistics, hundreds of slaves died, and only more than 20 died. A guard and 2 knights. The slaves gathered the fallen weapons and surrounded Jefferson's regiment, while the guards on the opposite side were trembling. Among them, the cavalry leader couldn't even hold the knife in his hand. He had imagined that he would be severely punished by the Lord. "Joe, don't be impulsive, you can say anything, as long as you let go of Master Jefferson, I can give you anything." Brand Butler shouted anxiously. "Hand over the young master, I swear by my knight's reputation that I will let you leave alive." The cavalry leader continued. "Of course they are anxious, how can they not? If the young master is really injured, or even killed, then they are also done, and they will definitely be buried with the young master. Know that their lord only has this only son." "You are so nice to say, just you gangsters, what credibility do you have? Don't be funny. You should put down your weapons quickly, or I will kill your young master," Joe said loudly. The cavalry leader burst into a cold sweat. He suspected that he would be killed by this group of slaves when he put down his weapon. But if he didn't put his weapon, the young master might die. At this moment, his mind was just a mess. "I don't know what decision to make. Everyone throw their weapons down, hurry up. Hurry up and obey my orders." This was from Jefferson's hoarse yell. At this time, he didn't look like a nobleman, his nose and tears were all over his face. How ugly it must be! Just how ugly! Even yellow stains appeared on his trousers, and his legs were trembling non-stop. The arrogant noble master, facing the threat of death, is no different from a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Don't hurry up to follow the orders of the young master. Butler Brand is really going crazy. Yu reading www.yu. How could he think that a simple inspection would cause such a big mess? At this time he had only one thought, and that was to save the young master. The guards could only choose to drop the weapon in their hands. The cavalry leader gritted his teeth, and had no choice but to drop the scimitar and buckler in his hand. "Get all of you to get me into that house, hurry up!" Joe directed the guards to move to the west, where there are stables and warehouses, and now the slaves have their weapons in hand. Corleone finally came back to his senses, only to find that there were corpses everywhere under his feet. He immediately vomited out. After vomiting, even the bile was almost gone. At this time, no one paid attention to him. Not only some slaves vomited, but many of the guards on the other side vomited. The situation on the scene was frightening. Joe's expression is calm, which is a small scene for him. Now the guards on the sentry post have gone down, and the biggest threat has disappeared. Then, as long as you get enough food and horses, you can escape from here. Joe's heart is already planning an escape route. After all, he knows the terrain nearby. He has sneaked a glimpse of the map of the barracks. Combined with the experience of other slaves, he thinks his escape route is still feasible. Corleone vomited as he walked. He didn't dare to fall behind. At this time, all the slaves who were standing gathered together, and there were a few severely injured slaves on the ground, but at this time they could no longer take care of them. Joe summoned a parchment in front of his eyes. He was surprised to find that his main occupation had changed, and the slave became an outcast, which also meant that he was free from the shackles of slaves. At the same time, he found that he had an additional attribute point, and he directly added it to the power. At this time, his power reached 8 points. As for other information, he had not had time to check. The slaves felt that their hope was coming, and then they could escape by following in the footsteps of Joe or Facne. After all, this little nobleman was in their hands, and the guards on the opposite side would definitely not dare to act rashly. Joe was panting nervously, and was finally able to get rid of his years of slavery. He felt that he was about to come alive again, as if he could smell the fragrance of dwarf ale from the wind. However, there is only the smell of blood on the field, and his heart is really big enough. But there is another person whose state is very wrong, that is Zabu. Most of the slaves have not noticed his abnormality, because at this moment they are both excited and excited. The violent period of Zabu's body is about to disappear, but his anger is getting stronger and stronger. He looks at the enemy in front of him, and he recalls his younger brother Tashi, this disgusting little white face. He can't bear it anymore. In the shocked eyes of everyone in the audience, Zab grabbed Jefferson by the neck and lifted him into the air. Joe was shocked, Facne was shocked, and the guards who had just put down their weapons on the opposite side were also shocked. Shocked. "Stop it!" Before Joe's words fell, he only heard a crisp click on the court. Jefferson's white and tender neck was bent at 90 degrees. Zabu didn't think it was enough to defuse his breath, so he chopped Jefferson's head with a knife. After coming down, he raised his head high and sprinkled hot blood on his face. "My silly critic of CNMD!" Facnet's curse was full of crying. Corleone also looked at everything in front of him in shock. At this moment, he thought to himself, how dare this guy kill a nobleman? In his previous worldview, the status of a nobleman could not be provoked, let alone kill a nobleman. Although he was very dissatisfied with the nobles' practices, he never thought of killing the nobles. This was caused by the education of his parents since childhood. However, at this moment, some concepts deep in his heart have undergone a fundamental change. Although the changes are still subtle, they are like young saplings that will one day grow into towering trees. The cavalry leader picked up the scimitar on the ground with his feet and rushed towards the slaves like a madman. The rest of the guards did the same. They all fell into madness as they watched their young master die just like this. As for the butler Brand, he has collapsed on the ground, his mouth is open and motionless like a dead man, and then as if nervous convulsions, he shouted, "Kill them! Kill all these animals!" He knew that he was dead. The only son of Lord Marcus died in the mine he managed. He was ashamed of the Lord's gift. Butler Brand looks like an upright villain, greedy and timid, but he also has an advantage, that is, his loyalty to his Lord. He knows that he will be put to death and his family will also be put to death. Take revenge for the young master before you die. He grabbed the short sword of a guard next to him, and rushed towards the slaves. In his heart, Joe was already squirting the barbarian Zabu in a different way. This mindless guy actually made the worst decision at the most critical time. There is no room for them to think about on the field, and the two people are in an endless state of death. The cavalry leader's buckler had long been thrown aside by him. He held a scimitar in his left hand and a dagger in his right. When he ran wild, he thought of his wife and children in his mind. He knew that the Lord's anger would be vented. Their bodies. Zabu laughed wildly at the sky, speaking in a barbarian language that was not understood by others. It was a memorial to his dead brother, which translates to, on their altar, he cruelly offered sacrifices, strong wind, birds, horses and blood, in order to sing memories or carols. He preached the prestige of those ancient gods. The proud wolves never forgive. Proud wolves, revenge is more than enough. Wherever the slave on the side cares about his beastly roaring words, some people want to give Zabu twice. Joe still hit his knees, and the guard kept falling down. Facni used his spear flexibly. Corleone also wrestled with the guard on the opposite side with his weapon. Zabu rushed towards the cavalry leader while shouting at this sacrificial song. He could feel that his violent period was about to disappear, so let himself die on the way to the charge. The cavalry leader has given up the idea of defense. He did not retain any strength. His two-handed weapons flew up and down, and the slaves in front of him could not stop his footsteps. They swept through the limit of the weapon's length, tearing the flesh and blood of those slaves. Zabu once again fought against the cavalry leader. Both of them had the same meaning in their eyes: dead fight. Fight to death. The cavalry leader swung his sword forward, and the two of them only fought for a moment, and he noticed the weakness of the barbarian. After blocking a slash of Zabu, the short sword in his right hand pierced Zabu's heart straight. At this time, Zabu has passed the violent period. The whole person is like a broken balloon, his muscles have contracted back to the original state, and his strength and speed have dropped drastically. So he couldn't avoid this sword, and he didn't want to avoid it. The short sword smoothly pierced into his heart, but he also approached the cavalry leader. He pushed forward forcefully, and the blade of the dagger broke from his back. The cavalry leader on the opposite side didn't expect this guy to be so crazy and planned to leave with his sword. The two have reached the distance between their faces. Zabu's hideous face faced the angry face of the cavalry leader. Before swallowing his last breath, Zabu bit the cavalry leader's neck without hesitation. This bite was his little strength, and his constantly polished fangs became the last killer. The cavalry leader's neck was first bitten through the flesh, and then the blood vessel was bitten. Tashi is dead. At the last moment before he died, he had a satisfied smile on his face. The cavalry leader held his neck and staggered back. But no matter how you hold your neck, it won't help. After all, if the aorta is bitten, he will die in tens of seconds. He is covering his neck with one hand, while the other hand is waving a machete indiscriminately. Joe caught a glimpse of the scene in front of him, and had to sigh that this Zabu is really a man, and then he found that several archers on the opposite side were facing Corleone's position. At this time, Corleone was holding a short sword and fought with two guards. He was covered with scars and felt a little tired. His blade was stuck on the shoulder bone of one of the guards, and the other guard moved the spear towards him. Corleone was poked in the abdomen. Joe arrived in time, chopped off the spear, and then violently pushed Corleone down. Corleone did not react, and fell to the ground. When he raised his head, he found that Joe had several arrows in his body, and the two guards were also shot by bows and arrows. It turned out that those archers found Corleone's amazing combat power, and despite the possibility of injuring friendly forces, they still shot sharp arrows. Joe protected Corleone, and 4 arrows were hit in his back, and a mouthful of blood poured out of his mouth.